Hello, everybody. This is Kim, and she'll be talking about the design of Power Up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim. This summer, I've been working on Power Up. Before I begin, I'll start talking a little bit about myself. I'm from Boston, and I'm a sophomore at Duke University studying computer science and economics. And like I mentioned before, I decided to choose to work on Power Up. I mainly chose it because I was really passionate about two things that Power Up involved, which are gaming and female empowerment. As a girl myself, I definitely feel that as I grew older, I struggled a lot with self-esteem issues, especially compared to my male counterparts. And I think it's really important that we have an app like Power Up that focuses on middle school age girls and tries to empower them so they can become more confident and avoid being low self-esteem like a lot of me and my other peers in college. And I'm super love gaming. I really like playing them. I really like designing them. So I thought this was a really perfect opportunity for me to work on something I was pretty passionate about. And here's the team that's been working with me all summer. For the students, we had Sachin, who worked on our Android version, and Yu, who worked on the iOS. For the mentors, we had our admin, May, who I worked pretty closely with for the UI. For Android, we had Anshul, Dara, and Deal. Deal also worked with me for the UI. And for iOS, we had Ginny, Jennifer, and Sally. Power Up is what I would consider sort of a fantasy lifestyle, choose your own adventure game that, as I mentioned before, really focuses on female empowerment of middle school to maybe early high school age girls. The goal here is to allow players to really truly express themselves while learning about how to deal with a lot of kind of difficult situations that they'll face as they grow older, be it puberty, reproductive health, or just difficult situations that might involve relationships or what have you. So the real focus is making something that's very inclusive and really fun, so it doesn't really feel like they're learning about choices to make or reproductive health or anything like that. The features that I mostly worked on can be put into 4 categories generally, which are overall visual theme, scenarios, minigames, and avatar. And there are miscellaneous couple other things that I also worked on. I think the main thing I thought about when designing for Power Up was how to make it really appealing for middle school girls. And that was a huge struggle when I first came in. Because I think when I first made my proposal for Power Up, I could really imagine what a female empowerment game or choose your own adventure type game might look like for my age group. But I'm a few years ahead of being in middle school or high school, so that was a huge struggle for me. I remember in my proposal trying to come up with UI that not necessarily was the best for middle school girls. So I just had to keep in mind this whole time how to make a really bold visual impact, keep them engaged, keep them interested throughout the whole thing. Which brings me to the overall visual theme. I mean, starting from the moment they install the app, I really wanted them to be engaged and already feel like something here is a little bit more refreshing. So the first thing I had to think about was color scheme. Here you can see I ended up going with white, kind of light blue, and yellow. Light blue is very deliberate. I really played with a few different colors to be this primary color. I chose between blue, purple, and pink. Since the idea of Power Up is kind of to allow girls to be who they really are outside of societal stereotypes, outside of these ideas that society perpetuates that even their family and friends might perpetuate, I ended up going with blue because it's the most gender neutral for a girl. Yes, it's still gendered because it's kind of the stereotypical color for boys, but I think it's more of a refreshing color for girls to see on an app that is targeted for their gender. Aside from that, we have kind of the bold outlines. I just wanted to make something that was really eye-catching, that kind of grabbed their attention from the beginning. The first UI I ever worked on was the scenarios. And that's actually the first UI that I really struggled with. I went through 4 iterations. The original UI, before I started working on it, kind of was actually in a very similar style. In my first 3 iterations, I tried to make, just dialog box at the bottom. You couldn't really see the own avatar except for just a headshot, that sort of thing. I really struggled with how to create a UI that middle schoolers would very easily understand. It's very intuitive. I remember having a conversation with May very early on about how to make this UI the most intuitive, and I was really resistant to the idea of going with dialog boxes because I thought it was pretty intuitive if there was just, one big dialog box at the bottom and not speech bubbles. But I think the conversation actually really helped me moving forward through Google Summer of Code because I think it opened my mind up to a lot of other design options that I had. And at the end of the day, I think this is the best iteration of our scenario UI. As you can see here, we have the avatar who's speaking to this non-player character, her boyfriend. It's very obvious who's speaking to who. And when, during the choose your own adventure style scenario, there's a choice that she can make. There's, she can scroll through her choices and then select one. The other part of the scenarios is the backgrounds. I've never, ever drawn so many backgrounds before. I think the real struggle here was how to make it very obviously the scenario that it was in. For example, we have in the first row, school, bedroom / dressing room, hospital, and in the second row, we have library, living room, and the store. I had to maintain the color scheme, the blue, white, yellow, just to keep the sense of unity. But the other struggle was trying to make them understandable for all different cultures. I remember discussing the hospital scene scenario with one of my mentors, Deal, and she said that if we added a red cross, it would be more obviously known that it was a hospital room. So then I added that. And the second struggle was trying to think of, given the dialogue scenarios that were occurring, where would they actually happen? So there's a few scenes involving the avatar's uncle that happen in the house. At first, I was content to just leave it with the dressing room. I thought that, yeah, the avatar would probably interact with the uncle in her bedroom, especially given the content of the scenario, which is that he's like kind of making her uncomfortable with his words and actions. But then after discussing with the mentors, it seemed like that kind of scenario would first happen in the living room. So I had to go make a new one there. One of the biggest things I've worked on this summer was the mini-games. We worked on 3 mini-games this summer, which are Minesweeper, the first one. The second one is Sink to Swim. And the third one is Vocab Match. Really, it's kind of finding this marriage between educational value, because all of our mini-games, I feel like the main focus was trying to educate. At the end of the mini-game, the players should feel like they learned something. In Minesweeper, it's about learning the success rates of contraceptives. In Sink to Swim, there's like a lot of true-false questions about puberty, about themselves. And Vocab Match is all about identifying the symptoms of puberty changes on their body that they might not know before. So it's all about making them really fun so they don't really feel like they're learning. The other part of it is making sure that they actually know how to play the game. For the developers and for me, I think it's really obvious how to play these games because we've worked with them so long. But I started to realize that younger kids who just got the game, they don't have as much exposure with the development and the backstory or anything. So it can be really confusing if they're just thrown into the game with no explanation. So we ended up implementing these tutorial screens. On the bottom here, you can see the 3 tutorial screens for Minesweeper. Just to be very explicit, I really didn't want any of the middle schoolers to open up the mini game, not understand what was going on, and then just quit and never play again. Because I feel like when I was a middle schooler, that probably would have happened to me. There's a wealth of entertainment options that are available on the App Store, or they can go on Netflix, or they can go on Facebook or Snapchat. So main focus was making it really understandable and really fun so they stick with us and actually get the value out of these mini games. To delve a little bit deeper, first mini game was Minesweeper. So the mechanics here were that you have this board of yellow stars, and you can click 5 tiles. Depending on the method of contraception, here we have condom on the side, there would be a different number of green to red stars. So if you clicked on a tile and it flipped over and it was green, then that was safe and you succeeded in, not getting pregnant. And the red one means that you ended up, the contraceptive method actually ended up failing. It's completely chance-based as opposed to Minesweeper, which is a little more like logic-based. But the concept is pretty much the same. So I really wanted to keep this theme of blue, white stripes, and stars in it so they really feel like they're still playing the same game, but they've just entered a little different mode, which is why we have the light blue background in the back. And I wanted to be very explicit. Anytime, if you hit a red star, you have this huge failure banner. If you succeeded 5 times getting green stars, there's like a huge success banner. And at the very end, once you finish playing the game, there's this pros cons screen. Because players do learn, I guess sometimes this contraceptive method isn't perfect. But they should also know any other pros and cons, maybe cost, maybe convenience that they might have with this contraceptive method. The second game I worked on was Sink to Swim. So there's this boat with the avatar in it, and if the player gets the statement on the big box correct and says it's true and it's correct, then they get to live more in the boat. It'll stay afloat. If they get one wrong, then as the gauge shows, it'll go into red zone and the boat is sinking. I think the really important part here was making it, again, really obvious when they got a statement correct, whether they identified it correctly as true or false. Yes, the score will increment once they get the question right, but I think it was even more obvious to have a check mark to show that it's correct, or an X when it's wrong. The other problem was trying to implement this really big background with lots of water. I really struggled with, before I had this very clean style, with the boxes, very clean borders. But I could do that style with water, but then I had to think about other visual themes that I had going on. Later, I'll talk more about the game map, which had a more flowy style like I've shown in this water and kind of like the shading on the boat to kind of keep it really unified. The last game I worked on was vocab match. This was actually the biggest struggle because it was really the question of how do we make matching vocab words with definitions actually interesting. At first, my first iteration were these word tiles. They were long rectangles and I had the word or the definition and the clipboards with this word. But that was really, really boring. It just reminded me of those vocab match quizzes you take in school. And I don't think players necessarily want to go back to those horrid memories of taking tests and quizzes at school. So then I switched them to image tiles. But then how do you illustrate puberty changes in a way that's not only understandable across cultures, but also not too explicit? Because these are some concepts and ideas that can be a little uncomfortable to look at and explicitly, especially in certain cultures where maybe they're not so open about it. For example, the training bra is talking about boob growth, chest growth, and I can't exactly draw that, but I can do something that's a little bit more kind of implying that idea. And the biggest part of the game that I worked on was the avatar. So you see here, there's a lot of different colors, a lot of different hairstyles, and a lot of different parts of the avatar customization. I really honestly think that this is the most important part of the game that I designed ever, more than overall visual theme, more than any of the mini games, despite their great value. Because I think part of the mission of Power Up is allowing the player to be who they really are and love themselves and be confident in who they are and make the best decisions for themselves. And the best way for that mission to be kind of achieved is for them to feel like they're in the game. They're making choices for themselves. They're not playing a different character who's not them. They're being themselves. So it was really important to be able to have a very wide variety of, races represented, hairstyles represented, visual preferences, whether it's tomboy, feminine, what have you, so they can be really who they are and who they want to be. If maybe their family, friends, maybe media is perpetuating this idea of feminine style, and they don't really feel like that's the style for them, but they're being forced into it, they should be able to express who they really are in this app. Or if they feel like, they're getting shamed for skin color or natural hair or whatever outside, and they're feeling forced to change it, then in Power Up, they should feel like they can be who they really are, and nobody's going to shame them for it. They can just, love themselves and be who they really want to be. Some miscellaneous aspects that I worked on that didn't really fit into those 4 categories were game map and story UI. So if you read the game map, it kind of has that more artistic drawing feel that was kind of represented in Sink to Swim. What I really thought about when I was working on the game map was, of course, how to make it modern, but also sort of cutesy, sort of fantasy-like. So part of the buildings, like the store, maybe isn't really that common. Maybe people, especially living in urban areas, would go to a mall. But I wanted them to feel a little bit removed, and kind of feel like this is a little more fantasy than totally exactly what they see if they'd walked out. So it feels a little more cozy, a little more intimate, was kind of the idea there. At first, since all these buildings represent levels, and they're not all available at the beginning, at first all I did was, gray them out, so it's obvious that they're not available as opposed to the colored in ones. But then we realized that that might represent a number of things, like, yeah, sure, maybe it's not unlocked yet, but also maybe it represents something they've already done, or it's kind of not that intuitive. So I ended up adding a lock on top of it to really show this is a locked level, and you unlock it eventually, but not yet. The last part I worked on here is just the story UI, which kind of goes off of the avatar customization. Again, it's just mainly thinking about how to make this very explicit. The check mark on the little box shows that it's already been purchased. In a newer edition that's not here, the buy actually turns into a select. So after they purchase it, they can try it on and put it on their avatar by just clicking on it. The grayed out box shows that they don't have enough money, which is karma, little star at the top. If they don't have enough, it's just grayed out, that's it. And all the available ones that are just white with no check mark are things that they can actually purchase. There's a few different categories: hair, clothes, accessories, so they can very easily access from the tab. Although we've done lots of work this summer, there's a lot that can still be done for Power Up in terms of contributions. You can see our GitHub repo. This is the link for our Android, but you can also find under the sisters GitHub the iOS version. We have a lot to go in terms of making this really the app that we all want it to be. In this GSoC, I really focused on this kind of phase 1 of her age. The goal is that the avatar would age and grow older and face more issues that they'll find as they mature, maybe even up to college level or past that, so they can really learn, what happens if they choose these choices, and really be educated, the choices that they can make, and be who they are. And a lot of new mini-games could be implemented, more rounds of these existing mini-games, of course, and even bigger avatar customization, more clothes, more accessories, and a lot more dialogue and choose your own adventure style scenarios. And that's really it. Thank you all for joining me, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Kim. I think it was really great how you kept an open mind on the different cultures and making sure everything was as inclusive as possible, as intuitive as possible. One of my questions was, what's your biggest struggle with keeping an open mind? Like, what was your biggest struggle with including all of these different cultures and including all of these different ethnicities?
I think, well, there were 2 struggles. Just keeping an open mind in general to like this design, because maybe it's not necessarily something I would find in the game that maybe is designed for me. So that was really a struggle because I always designed, for maybe a different, without that kind of mission in mind. So it was really difficult when I first started. But in terms of, just working with the cultures themselves, I think the biggest struggle was sometimes these things were not easy for me to draw. Especially I remember doing a braided hairstyle, the African-American braid style was really difficult for me to do. There's like a lot of different details in order for it to look like what it looks like in real life. So yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Are there any other questions from anybody else? Sachin, did you have a question?
No, me.
Okay. All right, so I'll go ahead. Oh.
Yeah, hi Kim. I would like to ask, like, what is your biggest learning in this, and what would you suggest to other people who are just starting for UI development?
I think what was really, really important for me was really putting myself aside. I think design is really all about, like putting your heart into it. I think if you're working on a project that you really are passionate about, you'll want to put your own preferences, like what looks good to you. And I think that's really important. But I think what's even more important is always thinking about that target audience. Even if it's something that if you were the player, you might not enjoy that much, or you might enjoy a different style, like always thinking about the audience is really, really important.
Thank you.
I have one more question. Hello.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what motivated you to design the things that you have? As in, like, just now you said that like the audience is more important than your thinking of the UI. So, what motivated you to like concentrate on the audience, and like you have been designing UIs, but then like even throwing away your work and then redesigning, concentrating on the audience, like what motivated you and how did you made up your mind, undo and rework?
I think what was really important in helping motivate me was how passionately I felt about Power Up's mission. I really, really felt like female empowerment for these young girls was so, so important, because I feel like when I was a middle schooler, this kind of app wasn't available. I really feel like I could have benefited from it. And since I am a gamer, I can like try to think about like what I would like to see from this game. So I can sort of put myself in the position of being someone who actually plays the game. So I just really wanted it to be the best. I really am so passionate about these girls actually being able to use this app, being able to be who they are, being able to learn from all of these different scenarios, these mini games, that's how I was able to keep thinking like I want to do the best for them so that they're able to really get them all the value from this app that we're building.
That's very nice of you and good work.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'll stop the broadcast. All right, thank you, Kim.
Thank you.